So this is our second Google Hangout, live on air. We have Steve and Matt from Craggy Range, and they're sitting in New Zealand, and it's 8 in the morning over there, so they're not as eager for their wine as we are. We have with us as well Caroline Byrne, who is a food writer and wine writer in Ireland. We have Frankie Cook, who is a wine blogger in Ireland. We have Jeff Corbett, who works in Searson's shop, runs Searson's shop, and knows all there is to know about wine. We have Patrick Lennon from Monart, and he is the wine manager there, and again knows and is very passionate about his wines. So they're all going to come up with fantastic questions. If anyone's watching and they'd like to ask any questions, we have the questions and answers app. So please do feel free, and we'll try and get through them. I'm going to introduce Steve and Matt, who are sitting there very eagerly waiting to talk about their wines. So Steve Smith is Master of Wine, and I'm going to start with you because he is one of the founders of Craggy Range. Over to you, Steve.
Well, welcome everybody. Great to be talking to you on the other side of the world. So yeah, my role here at Craggy is Wine and Viticulture Director, and as Harriet mentioned, I was very fortunate to meet up with Terry Peabody in 1998, where we started Craggy Range, and the whole basis to what Craggy Range is about is trying to present another side of what the New Zealand wine story is, and we decided very early on in our life to base that story around making entirely single vineyard wines. So that put a lot of onus on us selecting the right vineyards, the right sites, and particularly because we wanted to represent quite a diverse range of what New Zealand has possibilities for in wine, was the idea of making sure that we had obviously more than one estate. So the two major estates we have are our Gimler Gravels vineyard in Hawke's Bay and our Tamuna Road vineyard in Martinborough. And both of those vineyards are a greenfields operation. We started from scratch, which meant that we had this wonderful opportunity to create vineyards from the start without having any compromises in terms of what was already there. And for us, it was a wonderful time to do that because a lot of the pioneering work in New Zealand in terms of varieties and clones and site selection and all that sort of stuff had been done. So we had an opportunity to take that idea and apply the viticulture and the wine growing philosophies that we wanted to apply without any compromises at all. So it was a fantastic opportunity, and you know, that was back in 1999, and here we are 15 years later, and it seems sometimes like it was yesterday. So it's been a wonderful journey.
That's brilliant. It is amazing what you're doing, and how, as you say, you're very much relying on the land, which is quite an old world sort of ethos. But that's, I think, a lot to say for the quality and the restraint of the wines, which we'll go into later. But Matt is the man behind making the wines now. I think you're the chief winemaker, aren't you, Matt?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you want to speak a little bit about your I'll let you introduce yourself, sorry.
Yeah, hi guys. My introduction to wine was actually back in 2001, actually pretty closely similar time to my first introduction to Craggy Range. So I was completing a degree in soil science at the time, and I've been introduced to the concept of how soils impact wine quality, and especially the French concept of terroir. So I was starting on doing a research study into that, and I've sounded out a few local grape growers and vineyard managers around the country in New Zealand, and the immediate response I got from one person was quite long and lengthy, and this was back in 2001 before any wines had been made by Craggy Range, and this came from Steve Smith, and it was very conversational in tone, but it was about 2 pages talking about the special qualities we have in our soils and in our vineyards, and since then I've kind of been hooked and kind of realised how important soil is for making great wines, and now I'm in a very fortunate position to be working with our legendary estates to make these fantastic wines.
Yeah, it's I love the way both of you emphasise your love for terroir. Does anyone have any questions at this stage, or should we just keep going?
Yeah, keep going for now for me.
Yeah.
Likewise, yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay. I mean, I was just, I'm always amazed. I sort of, studying to be a master of wine, I always have great admiration for those who've actually got it. And Steve, being a winemaker as well as a master of wine, has the world at his fingertips, which I think has led him into, well, just made Craggy Range what it is. It's really pushed it. But Steve, can you sort of maybe project a little bit about how your experiences have helped mold the way Craggy Range has gone, or molded your definitions of what you wanted it to be?
Yeah, from a winemaking point of view, my real winemaking speciality is in the vineyard. I'm a viticulturalist by training, and I guess I ended up with this idea of loving what happens in the vineyard, but also loving what the impact of that can have on the wines that you make. So when it came down to do my Master of Wine in 1996, seems like a long time ago now, 18 years ago. It really opened up my eyes to the way the old world looked about wine, and if you talk to the guys in these great estates in Burgundy or Bordeaux or the Rhone or wherever, they don't often talk about flavour in wine. They talk about the texture and the feel of the wine, and all of those sort of more ethereal ways of looking at wine. So that made a huge impression on me, and I was lucky enough to spend quite a lot of time in the cellars in those areas, and I got to understand that in New Zealand we have this opportunity to make wines that are quite powerfully fruited, with real intensity of aroma and intensity of fruit. But really the real opportunity for us is because we had so much of this fruit character, there was a real opportunity to build texture and a bit more complexity and a bit more of the sort of, I want to use the old world feel, but that sort of tone in the wine, rather than concentrating on flavour and aroma, and if you do that, the wines are going to sit on a dining table a lot better. So that was a really core philosophy for me after I finished my Master of Wine, and then so soon after that to meet Terry and have the opportunity to say, okay, now we've got an opportunity to put those ideas into practice, and it really influenced how we established the vineyards, the very intensive plantings of the vines, close plantings, the clones and rootstocks that we used, the way that we made the wines, the way that we designed the winery. Everything was in that idea that we wanted to help build the texture and balance and complexity in the wines, and still make them obviously a New Zealand stamp on them, but not so much about the fruit, more about the feel of the wine.
Yeah, we were lucky enough at the weekend to try a Sophia from 2004, which is outstanding. Do you think that the wines have reached a peak, or are you still striving for better?
You never stop. You never stop striving for better. I mean, in 2013 we had the greatest vintage that I've experienced, but I can't wait to have another one like that now, because the little tweaks and that we make from a viticultural winemaking point of view will even make the wines better. And I think a lot of it's about the relationship you have with the land. So we only get one chance a year to have that relationship, because every year is different. So the more experience you have, the more you build up that link with the land and relationship with the land, the better wines that you're going to make. And for us in those, I mean, that 2004 Sophia, those vines were 4 and 5 years old. So many people have said you can't make great wine off young vines, or certainly wine that can age. And that was very early on in our winemaking life as well. So for us, we get really excited about that idea that these wines off young vines are looking really great now. When we have another vintage like 2004, we know exactly what we learned in 2004, how we'll apply it in that next vintage, and the wines will even be better. So there's definitely a restless ambition to what we do. There's no sitting back thinking that we've done the best that we can do. There's definitely a greater ambition than that.
Yeah, I think the most exciting stage is still to come. So with the foundations of Craggy Range, it is a shared dream between the Peabody family and Steve Smith, and trying to create a legacy in the wines we make. So in those early stages, I joined at the start of 2006, but you can see style was talked about a bit more, and using that inspiration from the old world to talk more about wine style. Now that we've got a number of vintages under our belt and the vines are getting more settled, we're starting to see what the vineyards are giving us, and we're probably more comfortable in what's coming naturally to us and just trying to express that best. And I think now these vines start to settle down even more. The really exciting thing is our vineyards are going to speak louder and louder, and the wines will become more and more interesting and more unique as well.
Yeah, you speak about vintages, and I know that it's not something that we're used to with New World wines so much as Old World wines. Does it make a massive difference in New Zealand? Could you explain that to everyone?
Yeah, New Zealand is definitely closer to what you might experience in Bordeaux and Burgundy than what you're going to experience in the Barossa or Napa Valley. We do have variation of vintages. You know, there's nowhere between us and the South Pole, so depending on which side of those weather events that you get, you can have very cool years and very warm years. So there's much more variation, that's for sure. So the challenge from a wine growing point of view is to not change what you do, but fine tune what you do from a vineyard and winemaking point of view to reflect that vintage, so that you know that what you produce from that particular year is a representative of the house of Craggy Range. So if you love Sophia, whether it's a 2004, which was a very cool year, or 2005, which was a slightly warmer, slightly wetter year, those two wines should represent the same sort of experience, but not exactly the same, because you get vintage variation. So there is a great challenge, and that's part of the I sort of call the art of wine growing, is that you have that relationship with the land. You try to get an impression of what the season's like, and change what you do from a viticultural point of view to represent the year. So by the time the grapes get to Matt, they're in a condition that what he has to do is very much a fine tuning of the winemaking philosophy that we have, because the grapes sort of do represent what that vineyard produces. And the really interesting thing, and you do see it in Burgundy and Bordeaux, in those really tricky vintages, it's the great estates and the great vineyards that come through. And so what we're starting to see with the Gimlet Gravels vineyard and the Tamuna vineyard is that, irrespective of this massive variation that we can have from vintage to vintage, the wines have definitely got the stamp of that place. And that's a really, really exciting thing for us, because it means we're sitting on a couple of pieces of land that are pretty special.
Yeah, I've got a couple of screenshots of I think the Tamuna and the Gimlet Graves. Do correct me if I'm wrong. I'll put them up, and I'll let you talk about them. Okay.
Yes, yeah, so that estate, that's the top terrace of our Tamuna Road vineyard there. It is taken from the northern part of it. Quite a large estate. It's 168 hectares of land, of which we've got about 90 hectares in vineyard. Most of what you can see there is the Pinot Noir vineyard, which is on the upper terrace, part of these old river terrace soils of the Martinborough Terrace. Quite unique soils in Martinborough, actually, in that when that river was there, the rocks that were rolling down the river, also the river included some volcanic ash. So you get this volcanic ash surrounding the rocks, and over the 30-odd thousand years that those rocks and ash have been together, that ash and the moisture and the air have decomposed some of those rocks. So a lot of the inert minerals that were in the rocks are now in the soil. So it's a pretty special piece of land. You don't see any other soil like that in New Zealand that grows Pinot Noir. So I think that's a really major reason why Martinborough is a pretty special place. What you can't see on that shot is there's a lower terrace where you have the large part of the Sauvignon Blanc vineyard, which is much younger soils, again river soils, but instead of being old, they're young. There's no volcanic ash there, but the wonderful thing from a Sauvignon Blanc point of view is that now and then you pick up a rock and it happens to be a limestone rock.
Where that is you can see the top of the map behind us, but it's probably Steve's head is blocking it, so it's probably he's moved his head around a wee bit, but it's probably between his eyes.
Guys, I can put the map up there for you.
There it is. So the shot that you just had there was from our Gimlet Gravels vineyard, the previous shot, and that is on the banks of the Naroroa River. There's the map there. You can see the two main estates that we have, the Tamuna Road vineyard at the bottom of the North Island, That's our home for Sauvignon Blanc and Pinot Noir. And then the Gimler Gravels Vineyard in Hawke's Bay, the warmest part of New Zealand with these gravelly soils. And if you look at it climatically, and particularly if you look at the period in the season between flowering and harvest, very, very close to the Bordeaux Margaret River sort of combination of things. So it's not surprising that it's a pretty good area for the Bordeaux Reds and Syrah.
I'm going back to
that's the Gimler Gravels Vineyard there. You can see very, very close to the river. The really interesting thing in New Zealand is that all of the greatest vineyard lands in New Zealand, or most of them, there's the odd one on the hills, but most of them are very, very close to the river. And the reason for that is, geologically being a very young country, the stoniest, graveliest soils are actually right beside the river. And as you get onto the hills, there's often a lot of, and onto some of the terraces, there's a lot of soil on top of those terraces. Whereas if you go to the old world, even the Napa, all of the gravelly soils are on the top of the hills, because the top of the hills have been washed off, and all of that loam is in the bottom of the valley. So.
Yeah, so Steve mentioned how young New Zealand is, but looking at that map, it's just 145 years ago that river flowed just where that vineyard is. Or sorry, looking at that photo. So yeah, it's very recently exposed land that we can farm for grapes.
Should we try some wine? We have with us the Tamuna Road Sauvignon Blanc 2013. Yep. I think most of the people joining in also have that. So let's talk through that, and maybe I don't know if whichever one of you would like to speak about it. I think fire away.
Okay, I'll take us through the Sauvignon, and then Matt can take us through the Te Kahu from the Gimler Gravels. So Sauvignon for us, this wine particularly, is a very crafted Sauvignon. It is not. It is one vineyard, but within that vineyard we have about 14 different parcels in the vineyard of slight variation in soil or slightly different rootstock combinations. And what we do is we farm those individual components separately, knowing in our own mind the contribution we want each of those parcels to make to the finished wine. And then at times during harvest, we will pick part of a block separately from another. So we might have 20 to 25 different batches of Sauvignon Blanc from the vineyard in each vintage that are fermented separately. We handpick a reasonable amount of this fruit so that we can whole bunch press. We find that's incredibly important for the textural component that we want in the wine, and it also allows us to have some of the fermentations with relatively high juice solids, particularly some of the barrel fermented components that we have. And that handpicking also allows us to practice a reasonable amount of wild ferment. So depending on the vintage, anywhere from 15 to maybe some years up to 30% of the parcels of wine that are used to make this are fermented with the indigenous yeast from the vineyard or the winery. So that's pretty rare in New Zealand. I think the idea for us, I think from a style point of view, is making a wine that we sort of call it Sauvignon for grown-ups. It's a wine that does have the essence of New Zealand in it, but it doesn't have the really powerful passion fruit, herbaceous aromatics that you might find in Marlborough. When you smell that wine, I get a lot more floral, nectarine sort of characters on the wine right at this particular time. It's I describe it as almost like a meadow character, where if you're walking through a meadow and you've got some flowers, you've got some clover, you've got some straw, you've got a little bit of grassiness, and then you might have the odd lime tree or nectarine tree around you. So that's sort of the characteristics that I sort of see aromatically on the wine. On the palate, again, the most important thing for us here is having a wine with really great texture. And this vineyard always produces for us this slightly chalky, almost savoury texture to the wine. It doesn't finish sweet and fruity. It's all about the texture and feel of the wine. Again, you get some of those lime and nectarine notes, but what I see in the wine is more these textural characters which provide some real interest and real length, and obviously sitting on a dining table really, really well suited to sitting alongside some pretty great food. And that can be this wine can handle anything from as simple as the best fish and chips you can experience. Mind you, the best place in the world to experience those best fish and chips is in New Zealand, by the way. Sitting on the banks of Kaikoura with some fresh blue cod fish and chips, and you've got the Southern Alps right at your doorstep with a bottle of Sauvignon. It's pretty nice. So
yeah. It's pretty nice with the green lip mussels as well. I love your lovely green mussels. And with that it would be fantastic, I think.
Yeah. So that's the sort of, I mean, of this wine, probably 60 to 70% of this wine is sold on premise, and it is currently the #1 on premise restaurant Sauvignon Blanc in the US from New Zealand. So we're getting some great support from the high-end restaurant community because the wine does really sit on a dining table really well.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. Does anyone have any feedback from their tasting? It's just complex. It keeps opening up, doesn't it?
Yes, you'll see that change quite significantly over the next hour or so, and it becomes more and more floral as the wine gets more air.
Yeah,
it's great. It's so unusual. It's not often you taste a kind of premium end New Zealand white like this. Usually they go for a kind of a fine minerality, more kind of delicate flavour. You don't often taste a wine like this. I haven't sold a New Zealand wine like this in the shop ever.
You're going to sell lots now, though, aren't you, Jeff?
I will. I recommend this all the time.
Yeah,
I agree with them. I agree with what the guys have said about the profile of the wine, and also about what I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name. I'm so sorry. What you just said there about it being quite different from the style of say, higher end New Zealand wine that we've tasted here. It's a lot more pungent, but at the same time, I agree with you. Very savoury, very mineral. The texture obviously it's the larger component of what you're tasting and what you're drinking. I do have a question for you actually, just because obviously there's a lot of really good say New World producers or from emerging regions in France like Languedoc-Roussillon who are establishing young wineries that are attempting to produce something that's not all about fruit or about that kind of clear fruit or powerful aromas and flavors of fruit. Do you relate to or identify with any other New World regions? I know you've mentioned the Burgundy and Bordeaux in France, but is there any other region like, say, Oregon or somewhere like that that you admire or that you relate to?
Oh, I admire wines from all over the place. I mean, there are great wine producers all over the world. If I had to pick one, it would probably be Napa. Simply because it's not just about the wine. I sort of do love the glamour of the place. You know, they do an incredible job of linking people very strongly to their place. They do an incredible job of hosting people, and in amongst that community, while there are a number of Napa wines that are big and rich and too New Worldy and not in my camp at all, within there you'll find some sensational wines. So that would be my choice. But you know, when you have a choice to go and work in different places, which I've been lucky enough to have those opportunities, at the end of the day, I just want to be here. New Zealand is sort of on this frontier of a opportunity to create a fine wine nation. To this point, the country has a reputation for great Sauvignon Blanc, but within the country there is incredible opportunities from Pinot Noir through to Syrah, from Riesling through to Chardonnay, to make some really exceptional fine wines, and I just want to be part of that. So this is, to do this at Craggy's been a great opportunity.
From the heart, Steve. Nice.
Pretty easy to say.
Yeah, no, I've been lucky enough to visit your country and it's amazing. But let's go on to the red wine, not to skip along, but we'll ask Matt to give us his expertise and understanding of this, the Takahu Gimlet Gravels, which is a Bordeaux blend. So can we start off with what varieties are in there, Matt?
Yeah, so Takahu, just to start with the name, that's Takahu is Maori for the cloak, and it refers to a mist of fog which comes through the valley here in the Tuki Valley. The Takahu essentially is the little brother of Sophia, the wine that we talked about before. So it's a Bordeaux-inspired blend, but Merlot dominant, Cabernet Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon, and Malbec. And from year to year, there may be some Petit Verdot in there as well. So it will probably reflect a wee bit in its componentry as to what we've used for the Sophia wine each year. But probably one of the unique things with the red wines, and especially from the Gimlet Gravels, is how fragrant they are. So one of the key things for us is we never really get excessive heat during our growing season. So we'll probably get 10 to 12 days above 30 degrees Celsius, and they're normally right in the peak of summer. So before most of that's happening just before or around the time that fruit's just starting to change colour. We don't have that really those hot days at harvest time. And you'll see that Napa Valley's just finished their harvest, and they had one of the earliest harvests on record, and it was very hot. So they'll have quite ripe characters. You'll see it every year in Australia where they may be picking at 40 degrees Celsius days. We always are picking our fruit at quite cool temperatures. So we maintain that freshness of flavour and really keeping those aromatics. That's especially critical for Merlot. So Merlot, if it's grown in a warm region, can be when it gets overripe, it's quite vulgar. It's very fruit sweet, jammy, and there's not much interest there. Our Merlot is always very aromatic and very finely structured. And so when you look at a Bordeaux blend, it's quite different from how a lot of other people approach a New World Bordeaux blend. So the Merlot is very aromatic already, and then we're looking to use Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Malbec or Petit Verdot to just give some different tannin feels to the wine. So it's not about trying to bring some aromatic spice to it. We'll still get that, but the Merlot is already really aromatic and fine. Mm. So within the vineyard, and this is probably linking it back to our land being so young. So whilst we have these large estates, they're quite variable in terms of the soil, and that's because we haven't had the centuries and centuries of erosion to even out the shape of the land. So we manage the Gimlet Gravels vineyard within 70 different block sections in the vineyard, and so each year we may have 30 different parcels of Merlot, about 10 of Cabernet Sauvignon, 10 of Cabernet Franc, about 6 of Malbec, and then a couple of Petit Verdot. So we will manage those in the vineyard separately, harvest them separately, ferment them separately, and then look to make an assemblage, which we normally do about this time each year.
So a lot of blends are including a lot more Petit Verdot. Is that because you can gain the ripeness out there, or I know?
It's Merlot is probably the easiest of those varieties to ripen consistently, and that's probably, if you look at it in terms of those varieties, probably Cabernet Sauvignon would be pretty hard to ripen consistently, and then Petit Verdot should be, in theory, harder to ripen than Cabernet Sauvignon. But we've had great success with a very small planting of Petit Verdot, and we've actually put some new vines in the ground last year, and it's showing really great promise. So the really exciting thing for that is the savoury feel, especially the tannin feel that brings to the wine. So there's no sweetness to the tannins, so they're a lovely, lovely savoury, almost a rustic feel to the wine, which is quite different from what we'd get from some of the other varieties. Yeah,
it does add a little bit of structure, doesn't it? And as you say, rusticity. It's lovely. Does anyone else have any? Sorry.
Yeah. On the blend, the idea of doing a blend, we talked about vintage variation before. You know, the way that the Bordelais deal with that is they deal with it, they blend, everything is blended. So whereas in the New World, most of these varieties are labelled as varietal wines, either Cabernets or Merlots. The way that we can ensure that our house style for this wine is reflective of us and the vintage and consistent is by blending the wines in the different proportions of Cabernet Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon that go with the Merlot every year. So that's why we've chosen to do a blended wine rather than a varietal wine.
Yeah, and I know that my father, Anthony, also my boss, always comments that he prefers a blend to a straight varietal wine. And I have to say, like tasting this wine tonight, it's just seamless. It's delicious.
Yeah, I agree with you. I love the savoury flavours from the tannin. I love that leather and the wood, and I think that it's just a much more enjoyable drink than to have just something more direct and straightforward in a varietal, particularly exploiting Merlot that way, which I think is a very maligned grape. I really like Merlot, and I really like right bank Bordeaux. I'd be a big fan of the likes of Saint-Emilion. I think that this is a beautiful way of exploiting Merlot, particularly, and I like the fact that you emphasize that with this blend.
Right.
Matt, what sort of oak treatment does this wine have?
So we're not heavy with oak, and so our red wines are all about the aromatics, and most of our wines are about the aromatics. So we're using oak more to give a additional tannin feel to the wine. So there will be a little bit of oak spice there. If it's jumping out of the glass, we've used too much. But we tend to use fine grain oak. With this wine, it's about 80% French oak, and there's a small amount of American oak. And we tend to use American oak on the Malbec, and that tends to kind of round out the tannins a wee bit, so it gives a bit of volume. And you see that especially in Argentinian Malbecs, there's a lot of American oak used there. So we tend to use that American oak portion for there, and then the rest is very fine-grained French oak. And it's more about just giving another feel to the tannin there, just integrating really nicely with the wines.
Yeah, it does. And how long would a wine like this last?
Well, it's interesting because as our vines age, I think the potential for these wines to last longer increases. The 2005 Takahu, which was made from 7-year-old vines, is drinking really well at the moment. So that's kind of gives you a bit of an indication. So probably for most people, that between the 5 to 10 year stage is ideal. But with all our wines, they're not overly tannic and they're not heavy wines, so they're very approachable in their youth as well. So it's probably more so that probably the bigger the piece of the meat for the younger the wine will work quite well just to even out that tannin. So on release, these wines go very well by the glass in steakhouses around the world. But as they fine out, they become a bit more serious and they're a bit more elegant in the overall tannin feel.
I think that's the major thing about these New World wines is the fact that, well, I'm sorry to put you all in a bracket, but is the fact that they are approachable young, and top quality wines like this you can drink and enjoy sort of when they're 2 or 3 years old, rather than waiting 10 or 12 years old. And this is a big selling point for these wines, the fact that you don't have to look at them in your cellar for years and years to get the complexity out of them.
Yeah, I think it's a trend all over the world actually that wines are drinking from every part of the world tend to be drinking better young, and I think a lot of that's to do with better standards you've got from a viticultural point of view and better control in the winery as well. So for us making these wines off relatively young vines, we don't quite know how long the wines are going to last, but I get a really strong feeling that they're going to be longer than what we originally thought. And particularly when you step up to a wine like Sophia, which is the big brother or big sister, I guess, of Sophia of this wine, that wine's probably got and from the good vintages, a 20-year life at least ahead of it. So I think they're going to be terrific older wines. And I think for me, the trouble is having the patience to leave them in the cellar long enough.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think, does anyone have any questions about these wines or any comment on them? Very quiet.
I just want to ask the guys there about the alcohol levels in the wines. I find that a lot of people now are moving away from the big, heavy alcoholic wines and are going towards the 12, 13% wines. Are you consciously trying to keep the alcohol levels in check, or is it simply a product of the winemaking and a balance of the wine?
I think it's what we've noticed is as the vineyards have got older, the natural ripeness in the vineyard is occurring at a lower sugar level. So we're starting. If you looked at these wines in the mid 2000s, they'd be sitting around the 14% level. We're really happy with these wines sitting closer to the 13% level now. I think the wonderful thing about New Zealand is that it is genuinely on the border of able to ripen these varieties. And when you do that and you look after the vineyards properly, you're not going to get the high alcohols that is a challenge in a lot of other parts of the New World and even in the Old World now, where the seasons and the climate is getting warmer. So there's definitely a movement in those areas to be producing wines with lower alcohol. It's sort of hard for them to do it though, because they're not getting, particularly with red wines, they're not getting the natural phenolic or seed ripeness or flavor ripeness happening at those lower sugar levels. So it's a really big challenge for them. Whereas for us, because we live in the environment that we live in, is that the natural alcohol levels for us, are sitting in this sort of sweet spot of 13 to 13.5 for the reds and 12.5 to 13.5 for the whites. So it's a nice spot to be in naturally without having to sort of contrive it by picking date.
Yeah, it's fascinating how the alcohols are just leveling out at the moment, and there's far less pressure on controlling it, whereas people realize that it's all about just the natural balance of the wines. Before we, I just suddenly realized that we've got these wonderful participants tasting wine with us, and anyone who's watching or tuning in later has no idea who they are. So before we have a final goodbye from Steve and Matt, I'd really appreciate from left to right, everyone just to introduce themselves and give a little bit about, just say what they do, or just why they love wine. Sorry to put you on the spot, guys, but I know that if people do watch this afterwards, they'd like to know who you are. So, Amelia, you go first.
Hi, so I'm Amelia. I work for Tyndall Wine Merchants. I'm in charge of the sales office, and I'm French. I'm from Bordeaux. So wine is just part of my life. That's it. That's why I love wine.
Thanks, Amelia. Go for it, Caroline.
Hi, I'm Caroline. I write a wine column every month for an Irish magazine here called The Irish Garden. My wine column is usually directed towards food and wine matching with the seasonal recipes that we do in the magazine. And then I also join Early Wally in the Sunday Times in tandem with Martin Moran on our weekly wine review. We usually have themes, whether that would be, say, Ripasso or Loire Valley White, which is what we were doing in the last week. And then apart from that, I got very into wine, more so than food, because it's fascinating and more romantic and more evocative and more interesting, and I've always really enjoyed it. So it's a privilege to be part of this evening. I'm really pleased, and thanks very much again, Harriet, for organising it.
Thanks, Caroline. Okay, Frankie, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm a wine blogger of a year and a half now. So I've been in wine for close to 20 years, and I'm probably one of the few other people who visited Craggy Range twice. But it wasn't the same trip. So I've got myself a nice collection of different Craggy Range bottles here, as well as the other ones. So, very quickly, where is the vineyard in relation to the Game of Thrones?
Frankie, it's a bad line. It's unfortunate, but if anyone missed it, Frankie is he's a blogger. He loves wine, and hopefully everyone's going to blog about this afterwards and fill in the gaps. But I'm going to pass you on to Jeff, and hopefully we have a bit of a better signal here. Sadly, Ireland and Aircom haven't really got the internet sorted yet.
Hi, I'm Jeff. I run the Searsons wine shop in Monkstown in Dublin. We have a nice shop, quite a small space, but a good range of wines from everywhere. So I've been in the wine trade for over 20 years now. And if you're ever in Monkstown, come down and pick up a nice bottle of wine.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, Richie joined us just now because he had technical difficulties, but he's been watching. So fire away, Richie.
I don't know if you can hear me.
We can.
Good stuff. It's just the technical difficulties indeed. They've been saying my microphone's not working now, so hopefully you can hear me now.
It is.
Good. No, I've been listening all through the Hangout, which is fantastic. And I myself have been in the wine trade about 5 years now. I used to work for a different wine importer here in Ireland, and now I'm kind of do the PR for them. So kind of independent wine blogger myself as well. So I'm always interested to partake in these things as well. So yeah, like I said, definitely gonna be blogging about this afterwards. I think the wines are absolutely fantastic. It was frustrating I wasn't able to speak up as as we were tasting through them, but they have such amazing delicacy and balance. The Te is absolutely incredible. It's just so fine and fresh and balanced, really, really beautiful wine. So yeah, thanks guys, and thanks Harriet for hosting us tonight.
Brilliant. I wanted to get Patrick in, but he's having massive problems. He lives in Gorey, and Wexford is out in the country. So he's struggling with his internet, poor lad. But Patrick, I'll speak up for him. He's one of the most enthusiastic people I know about wine, and he works in a very smart hotel known as Monart, which is where you can go and get massaged and pummeled and wander around in your dressing gown, and it's very sort of premium place. But I'd love to go there. So I'll pass you back to Steve and Matt, and they'll say their goodbyes. And again, any last-minute questions, please feel free.
Okay, thanks, Harriet. You know, it's fantastic to be with Tyndall in Ireland. We've been in Ireland for some time, but I had a fantastic trip there last May. Was it May last year or this year? This year. And saw your wonderful country. Had a pretty decent game of golf, which the New Zealand contingent won. So we hold the trophy at the moment. So, but saw a wonderful part of your country. Enjoyed it. Obviously, we have a natural bond with our great love of rugby, but also the countryside has some similarities as well. So always enjoy the relationship we have with Ireland, and fantastic to have the wines sitting in some great places in that part of the world. So great talking to you. It's always great to talk to people, wine people on the other side of the world, and a Google Hangout gives us an opportunity to do that a little easier than it was a few years ago.
Yeah, thanks guys. It's been great talking with you all. It'll be great to welcome as many of you as possible over here to New Zealand to be able to walk through the vineyards with us and taste the wines here. They always taste better close to the vineyard and close to the winery. So I'm hoping that they're tasting really well there, but I'm sure you'll enjoy them more once you venture to our shores. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thanks, guys. I think everyone's looking forward to going and finishing off their glasses of wine.
More questions.
We got to go to work.
Yeah.
Would it be okay to ask one last question of the guys just before they go?
Sure.
I just want to say thanks very much. It was wonderful to talk to you and to get a great sense of your ethos and what it is that goes into your winemaking. Just in reference to what you were saying about age, are you happy to continue to make wines with a 5 to 10 bottle wine span, or are you ever interested in creating wines that can show that kind of long-term development? Is that something that you're really interested in doing, or do you think that's not necessary?
Look, I think if you're in the fine wine world, particularly with reds, ageability is important, because there's nothing like drinking a wonderful old bottle of wine. You know, I don't think we'd change the way that we made the wines. We're not trying to make the wines in a way that necessarily either drink young or the ageability thing. I think certainly in the Gimlet Gravels vineyard and also in Martinborough with the red wines, there's definitely a natural opportunity for those wines to age because of the way that the tannins are constructed, and also the way that we approach the winemaking. So, you know, a wine like Sophia, when we release something like the 2013 Sophia, which will be released next year, I think that wine's got real longevity, and I'm hoping it won't outlive me, but I've got a feeling it might.
Yeah, and it is creating that legacy, and I think we'll find. And hopefully the best bottle of wine that's enjoyed under that we've been involved in making is actually enjoyed once we've passed away. So it's for those.
I don't want that to happen.
Yeah,
But you know, the thing about drinking an old bottle of wine is it's not just about the quality of the wine. You're actually capturing a moment in time. So when you drink something that's old, I love going and seeing what else was going on in the world at that time, because it may not be in its best shape, but it's still old and it's still got personality, and it's often a reflection of what was going on in that world at that time, certainly at that particular estate. I know if you look at our wines, you definitely see in some of the vintages the mode that we were in as a winemaking team at that point in terms of where we were in our evolution. So, you know, when you drink an old bottle of wine, it's always something very special, and it may not necessarily be your best glass, but have a look at what was going on in the world at that time and you'll enjoy it like hell.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Yeah, really good, really interesting, fascinating, and thanks everyone for being here. And thank you very much to Steve and Matt for getting up early to drink wine with us. Taste wine, drink wine, sniff wine, smell wine, talk about wine. It's brilliant. Thanks and good night.
Thanks, Ariel.